If you have ever felt that cold prickle on the back of your neck, the instinctual realization that the person standing next to you isn't just awkward, but dangerous, then you know exactly where this story begins. We like to think that workplaces are safe, predictable environments governed by rules and social contracts. But sometimes, the mundane mask of a 9-to-5 hides a predator waiting for the lights to go down. Today, we are diving into 3 separate, yet chillingly similar accounts of normal jobs that turned into psychological battlegrounds. These aren't just stories about creepy coworkers. They are about the violation of safety, the terror of being hunted, and the sheer will it takes to survive when the person you least expect decides you are their prey. If you've ever dreamed of serving justice to someone who wronged you, or if you've ever felt the fear of being watched in your own home, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn the lights down low. You're going to want to hear this. It started with a summer internship, the kind of thing every college kid chases to pad their resume. I was 20 years old, just about to enter my senior year, and I landed a position at a financial services firm downtown. It wasn't glamorous. It was rows of beige cubicles, the hum of hard drives, and the smell of stale coffee, but it was a foot in the door. There were 8 of us interns in total, crammed into a section of the open office where the walls were just low enough to force a kind of fake intimacy. Most of them were great relaxed, funny kids just trying to survive the summer. But there were 2 who stood out, and not in a good way. There was Eric, a guy who typed like he was trying to start a fire with his keyboard, treating the internship like a matter of life and death. And then there was Alex. When I first met Alex, he just seemed quiet. He was tall, painfully thin, with pale skin, and a mop of dark hair that always looked like it needed a wash. He didn't fit the finance mold, but I didn't think much of it. That changed quickly. It started subtly. I would be typing away, minding my own business, when suddenly, a head would appear over the cubicle wall. It was Alex. He would lean over, just his head and shoulders visible, looming like a grim reaper in a cheap button-down shirt. He would tilt his head at an unnatural angle, flashing this frozen, stretched grin that didn't reach his eyes. And then he would speak. He wouldn't use his normal voice. He would drop it into this slow, deliberate, raspy tone like he was doing a bad impression of a movie villain. He'd say things like, "Working hard or hardly working, Ronnie," dragging out the syllables until they hung in the air, heavy and uncomfortable. The first few times, I laughed it off, assuming he was just weird. But it happened every single day. It became a ritual. I would see his head slowly rise above the partition, that same Richter's grin plastered on his face, and the torment would begin. He would mutter random phrases that made no sense, or tell jokes that had no punchline, all in that unsettling, performative whisper. It was like a scene straight out of a horror movie, the kind of thing you expect from a character on a screen, not a real human being in an office building. The other interns noticed, but they just laughed, thinking Alex was a quirky character trying to be funny. They assumed we had a rapport, but the truth was, I was his captive audience. He was targeting me, singling me out for this bizarre psychological game he was playing. As the weeks went on, the visits got longer. He would lean over my desk, staring at me in silence for minutes at a time while I frantically typed to avoid eye contact. I felt the walls closing in. I felt powerless. Then came the phone call. It was a Tuesday night, about 6 weeks in. I was at home, eating dinner, when my phone rang. An unknown number. I usually ignore them, but I was expecting a package. So I picked up. I said hello and was met with dead silence. Then, that voice. It was Alex, but he wasn't whispering anymore. He was yelling. "The tide's coming in. Ronnie, pull your boat out of the water." He dragged the words out, singing them in a mocking, taunting cadence, and then he laughed. It was a hysterical, unhinged sound that echoed through my apartment. He hung up, and I sat there, frozen, my heart hammered against my ribs. I had never given him my number. Not once. I texted the number immediately. "Is this Alex?" The message failed. Not delivered. I looked the number up online. It was a landline that shouldn't have been able to call me, and certainly shouldn't have had his voice on the other end. I want a girl character. That was the moment the fear turned into panic. How did he find me? Why was he doing this? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he found a contact sheet, but deep down I knew this wasn't professional. It was predatory. I went into work the next day, bracing myself, but Alex wasn't there. His desk was empty. I went to our supervisor, Martin, and asked about the number. Martin looked confused. He told me Alex had been fired on Friday for not doing any work. He was gone. When I told Martin about the call, the color drained from his face. The other interns overheard, and the atmosphere shifted. They weren't laughing anymore. They admitted he had made them uncomfortable too. Martin assured me Alex was gone for good, that he had no reason to come back. And for a week, I believed him. Then came the morning I can never forget. It was 5 a.m. on a Friday. The sky was that bruised gray color just before dawn. I woke up suddenly, pulled from sleep by a noise outside. I don't know what it was, maybe a branch snapping, maybe a footstep, but I got up and looked out my bedroom window. I wish I hadn't. There, in the middle of my backyard, halfway between the trees and the porch light, stood a figure. Even in the low light, I recognized the silhouette immediately. The thin frame, the messy hair, the ramrod-straight posture. It was Alex. I couldn't move. I just stared, my breath catching in my throat, praying I was hallucinating. Then, he tilted his head back, and I heard it. That voice. He sang my name, dragging it out in that same creepy sing-song tone he used at the office. He was standing in my yard, in the dark, mocking me. I scrambled for my phone, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I was about to dial 911 when I saw him tilt his head back and start laughing. It was that same hysterical laughter from the phone call, echoing through the silent suburbs. It sounded detached, like he had completely lost his mind. I threw the window open and screamed. I told him I was calling the police. I waved my phone like a weapon, screaming at him to get off my property. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, grinning up at me, laughing in the face of my terror. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he turned. He didn't run. He just walked away, slowly, still laughing, until he disappeared into the dense trees behind my house. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They couldn't do anything. He hadn't broken in. He hadn't physically threatened me. It was just fear. I had to live with that unease for the rest of the summer. I finished the internship, took the job offer they gave me, but I never went back. I couldn't. To this day, I don't know how he found my address. I don't know what he wanted that morning, but I know that for a few months I worked alongside someone who wasn't just weird. He was hunting me, and the sound of him laughing in the dark is something I will never ever forget. But my story isn't the only one. Sometimes, the danger doesn't come from the person acting strange in the corner. Sometimes, it comes from the person you least suspect, the one who seems harmless until you peel back the layer. When I was 17, I got my first job at a grocery store in a quiet town in Vermont. It was the kind of place where nothing ever happened, where everyone knew everyone, and danger felt like an abstract concept from movies. I loved the job at first. It was easy, the coworkers were friendly, and we spent the slow shifts hanging out by the registers, gossiping and complaining about customers. But there was one guy, Sean, who worked in the dairy section. He was 24, a bit older than me, with awkward grown-out hair and a vibe that screamed he didn't know how to read a room. He was quiet, polite. I barely noticed him, until I was added to the work group chat. At first, it was fine, but then, Sean started messaging me privately. It started with work questions asking about my shifts, but quickly it pivoted. He wanted to know what music I liked, what I did after work, what I did on the weekends. He started calling me cute. He was 7 years older than me, an adult man messaging a teenage girl, and the tone made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to make a scene at work. I told myself he was just socially awkward. But the persistence was wearing me down. He would comment on my social media posts late at night. He was always there, lurking in the digital background. Then came the day I was watching Stranger Things in my room. It was my favorite show, and I was binge-watching it, completely lost in the story. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone at work. A few days later, we were all standing at the front of the store, talking about TV. Sean walks up, looks me dead in the eye, and asks, "You like Stranger Things, right?" I froze. The conversation stopped. The air in the store felt heavy. I hadn't told a soul. How did he know? I managed to nod, brushing it off, but inside I was terrified. That cold feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. It wasn't a guess. It was a statement of fact. He was watching me. A few nights later, the fear became tangible. I was lying in bed, drifting off to sleep, when I heard it. A soft scraping sound against my bedroom window. Tap, tap, tap. It was distinct. It was deliberate. I crept to the blinds and peeked through. Nothing, just the dark night air. But I knew it wasn't a branch. The next day I texted Sean. I told him firmly, clearly, that I wasn't interested. I needed it to stop. His reply came instantly, a chilling confirmation of my worst fears. "Okay," he wrote, "good luck changing your address." In one text message he dropped the act. He admitted he knew where I lived. He admitted he had been watching. I took screenshots. I went straight to my manager, and then to the police station with my dad. We filed a report. We started the paperwork for a restraining order. Sean was fired on the spot when my boss confronted him. But even with the legal system involved, I didn't feel safe. A piece of paper doesn't stop a lunatic. I checked the locks 3 times a night. I jumped at every shadow. It took months for the paranoia to fade. Eventually, he never came back. He disappeared, just like Alex. But the lesson stuck with me. It's not the obvious monsters you have to worry about. It's the quiet ones, the ones who seem harmless, who slowly erode your boundaries until you realize they've been inside your life the whole time. And sometimes, you don't have the luxury of distance. Sometimes, you are trapped in a box with a monster, and you have to rely on your wits to survive. When I was 26, I worked at a small insurance office in Pennsylvania. It was a depressing place, flickering fluorescent lights, endless rows of desks, the smell of old coffee. We were behind a strip mall, isolated and quiet. One Friday, a massive storm rolled in. The kind of storm that takes over the news, with rain that blurs the horizon and thunder that shakes the foundations. The manager let most people leave early, but a few of us stayed to catch up on filing. One of the people who stayed was Tom. He had started 2 weeks prior. He was tall, quiet, and off-putting. He never spoke, but he was always there. If I went to the break room, he appeared. If I was at the copier, he was hovering nearby. I thought he was just awkward. I was wrong. By 5 p.m., the storm was raging. The power flickered and died, plunging us into darkness, save for the faint orange glow of the emergency lights. The silence of the office was broken only by the deafening sound of the rain. I decided to leave. I grabbed my bag, but Tom stood up. I heard the jingle of keys, and then the heavy click of the front door lock. He muttered something about it not being safe to go outside yet. My stomach dropped. I told him I needed to call my boyfriend, but when I checked my phone, there was no signal. The landline was dead too. I turned around to ask Tom what was going on, and I jumped. He was standing right there. In the dim light, he was holding a small flashlight under his chin, casting eerie shadows across his face, smiling that half smile that didn't reach his eyes. I forced a nervous laugh, asking him to unlock the door. He refused. He said we had to wait. I pretended to go back to my desk, but my mind was racing. I watched him. When he wasn't looking, I made a run for the back door, the one that led to the lot where my car was parked. I grabbed the handle. It wouldn't budge. It was chained shut from the inside. He had trapped me. I heard the beam of the flashlight cutting through the darkness down the hall. He was coming. I ducked into the supply closet, squeezing into the corner behind a stack of paper boxes. I held my breath, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. I heard his footsteps stop just outside the door. Then, he called my name. He said he just wanted to make sure I was safe. The way he said it, possessive, controlling it, made my blood run cold. The light strip under the door flickered as he stood there. I waited, shaking in the dark, until the light moved away. I crept out of the closet. I saw the flashlight beam moving toward the front of the building. I saw my chance. I ran for the front. I turned the corner and stopped. The glass front door was shattered. Rain was pouring into the office, soaking the carpet. Tom was gone. I didn't hesitate. I scrambled over the broken glass, ignoring the stinging cuts on my hands, and sprinted into the storm. I didn't look back. I got into my car, locked the doors, and didn't stop shaking until I was home. The next morning, the police found his car still in the lot, his keys, his wallet, his phone all inside. The cameras had been manually turned off. He had planned this. He had prepared the office, but for some reason he fled. Maybe he snapped out of it. Maybe he got scared. But I know one thing. If I hadn't hidden in that closet, if I hadn't run when I did, I wouldn't be here today. I quit that job. I couldn't look at those fluorescent lights without feeling that terror again, but I survived. And that is the only justice that matters in the end. These stories stay with us, echoes of the terror we felt, but they are also proof of our resilience. We survived the laughter in the dark, the tapping on the window, the locked doors. And if you've ever felt that fear, know this, you can survive it too. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell us in the comments what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed. And of course, subscribe for more stories like this.